Hey, what is going on, guys? XpertFusion here, and welcome to Telltale The Walking Dead TV Adaptation Series, episode 6 of Season 2. This episode is titled 400 Days. So obviously last episode was based on Clementine's story and what was going on there, and they found this person named Rudolph in the woods. His people seemingly just got shot up, and they're going to interrogate him because Clementine realized that this guy named Rudolph was actually in the woods with Krista, and there was two other guys there. Obviously, one of them died, the other one was still there. And so we're not going to find out what happened after that in this episode. This episode is actually going to extend on to episode 4. So obviously the episode ended with Omid and Tavia and Russell approaching Kenny at the house, and they had this whole conversation. Omid was talking to Kenny. Omid really wanted to go out and find Krista, but Kenny tells him that Wellington is just no more. It's not there anymore, according to the messages. Or it's there. It's just they're not allowing new people in. So they kind of just said, well, why should we bother going there if they're not going to let us in? So this episode is going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of flashbacks, and there's also going to be a lot of present-day stuff going on. This is a longer episode, so if this was going to be like in a TV show, it would probably be like an hour-and-a-half episode. They'd have to extend it because of how much content is in it. So the episode begins the same day as episode 5. So this is in unison with what's going on in episode 5. It's about 2 days later from episode 4. Vince, Shell, Wyatt, and Eddie are on a supply run outside of a grocery store. There's a giant horde of walkers right outside of it. They go over a plan for how to go about this. Eddie says he'll lead the walkers towards him with the truck as they run down the side of the parking lot and run around back. He'll keep driving away and make his way back to Remington Road, which is this road that's around the corner about a block or two away. Eddie runs to his truck as they all get ready to go and start the plan. He starts it up, slowly drives on the highway, or on like the in the road basically, and honks the horn as much as he can to try to lure all these walkers towards him, because they're obviously all in front of this grocery store that they're trying to get into to see what's going on with it. Vince, Shell, and Wyatt run down the side of the parking lot, and they get around back. They come across a few walkers. Vince uses a machete, Shell uses a long hunting knife, and Wyatt uses a hammer. Eddie drives over tire spikes in the road as the truck makes a halt in the nearby grass. He uses the walkie and tells the others that the truck is fucked because for some odd reason there's goddamn tire spikes in the road, and so he has to get out of the truck, and he tries to avoid the walker herd. He runs down the road backwards as the horde comes towards him, and he's just trying to lead them away now on foot. The others abort their mission to go help Eddie because they know Eddie's more important than supplies, basically. They go through the woods as they come across some more walkers that they have to take out. They see Eddie on the road through the woods, but instead of engaging, they decide to go another way to find a vehicle. Eddie comes across a big greenhouse and goes around it as he suddenly gets trapped in a bear trap. He is freaking out as his foot is completely stuck between two sharp metal frames. The walkers approach him as he tries to crawl away after releasing his foot with the release latch. He crawls away from the horde just as the group comes rushing in with the white van. Shell is driving as she pulls up next to him, and Vince and Wyatt shoot out the back of the van doors at the walkers. Wyatt grabs Eddie and brings him into the back of the van as they drive off. Shell says, "What a goddamn shit show." Back at the cabin, Kenny checks on Omid as he sleeps in his bed. Kenny then goes over to the kitchen and has some cereal as Bonnie is making eggs. Becca is reading a book in the living room. Russa and Tavia are outside on the porch. Tavia talks to Russell about this whole situation with Wyatt and Bonnie. Tavia says she really doesn't even care anymore. Aaron comes back with a deer after hunting. Russell makes a joke and says, "Oh, you brought me a pet deer, how thoughtful." And because, Russell loves making jokes and shit. Bonnie goes outside and asks the two if they want some eggs. Russell says sure, as Tavia says she's fine. Russell goes inside as Bonnie sits down next to Tavia. Bonnie says she knows something used to be between her and Wyatt. She says it's quite obvious. Bonnie says she wouldn't be surprised if she hates her, but she says that if she needs to tell her anything, to just please be honest and tell her it. And Tavia says, "Okay, honestly, your breath smells like shit, so please back away from me." And then Bonnie walks off, kind of pissed a little bit, but she's like, okay, whatever, and goes inside. Omid wakes up and packs his bags as he heads out. Kenny stops him and says what he's doing, and Omid says he's leaving. And he said he was going to leave, and now he's leaving whether or not he's ready. And Kenny says he said a few days, not 2 days. Omid says the longer he waits, the further she will be. And Kenny says what happens when she's not there. And then Omid says they'll just head back. And then Kenny tells Omid to just please wait a few more days. Omid gets pissed but drops his bags and goes back to bed. The others quickly return as Tavia sees them rushing Eddie inside to Bonnie. Wyatt says his leg is cut up pretty bad and bleeding a lot from the bear trap. Bonnie helps him out in a little infirmary room they created in the house. The others talk in the living room as the group goes over what happened. Russell asks how good of a doctor Bonnie is, and Vince says she was in college getting her nursing degree when this whole thing happens, so at this point it's the best type of doctor they're going to get. Vince says he wants to get another group to go back to that grocery store. Maybe they'll get some more people. Tavia asks what's so important about this grocery store, and Vince says it's got a lot of the dead around it, meaning not many others have probably been able to get inside of it, so it's probably got a lot of supplies in it. And they definitely need more supplies right now. Tavia asks Vince what he was before the apocalypse, and Vince questions why she's asking, and Tavia says that she kind of wants to know about all of you. She says, since we're all staying here, since Wellington is not an option anymore, might as well just get to know each other a little bit. And Vince says, all right. And she says, I guess we can go around and tell our stories. And Tavia says, actually, I want to know about your stories during the apocalypse, not before. She says before life was kind of boring. The group in the living room all look at each other as Bonnie walks in. She says she patched him up pretty good, but he's passed out because of the blood loss. He should be all right in no time. Aaron catches Bonnie into what they are doing, and Vince says he'll go first. Day 5 pops up on the screen, August 2010. This is very early on in the apocalypse. Vince walks down the road of a very underprivileged city. He goes out an alleyway whilst it's raining outside, and he is suddenly jumped and thrown into a white van. He wakes up in a garage handcuffed to a pipe. A man holds a gun to his forehead. The man's name is Gonzo. He asks Vince where the fuck is his money. Vince says he'll get it to him, and he had some complications is all. Gonzo says he doesn't believe him, and Gonzo says when he was being generous and giving him all that cocaine, he was expecting him to be a man of his goddamn word and get him his money. And Vince says they didn't sell it all yet. He says it's been hard with this whole thing going on in the city. People are dying. He can barely get anywhere without cops being everywhere. Another man named Ray, who's also a part of Vince's drug operation, is also tied up on the other side of the room to a support beam. Gonzo says he's sick and tired of this bullshit. Vince says he'll get it to him. Gonzo says he knows, but he needs something to motivate him a little bit. Vince is confused as Gonzo takes his Glock and shoots Ray in the stomach 3 times. Vince yells at him and is obviously upset about this because he must have been close to Ray in some way, shape, or form. Gonzo says he'll be back. He has a meeting to go to. He says he'll leave him here for a couple hours to think about what he's done, and when he lets him go, hopefully he'll wise his ass up. Ray is now dead as Vince stays put against this pipe. He lays down on the floor as he starts talking to Ray, even though he's dead. He says he's sorry for dragging him into this drug operation since clearly he didn't want to do it in the first place. Vince says he doesn't know what to do because there's no way in hell he's going to sell this damn coke. Vince just lays there for a bit, and then some time goes by, and we see, the daytime going by and stuff like that. Ray slowly gets up as Vince looks shocked at the fact that he's still alive, but Ray is not normal. He starts growling at Vince, but he's still tied to the support beam, but his rope starts slowly getting loose and even more loose. Vince keeps asking what the hell is wrong with him as Ray gets loose enough and then goes after Vince. Vince kicks him away and tries to hold him back with his feet. He tries his hardest to rip the pipe off the wall as Ray, as a walker, gets up and heads towards him. He's able to break loose as he sees blood pour out of Ray's mouth. He takes the pipe and smacks it across Ray's face. He hears someone coming back into the room as he gets to cover behind the door. Gonzo walks in, and Vince knocks his ass out with the pipe. He grabs the keys and his Glock and heads out of the garage slowly. He goes through an hallway of the warehouse as he notices a few guys at a poker table. He makes a run for the door as they notice him and run after him. Vince runs down the street and he just keeps on running. We get back to present and Tavia says, "Holy shit, you were a drug dealer?" Vince says he doesn't really mind telling people that story because he knows it was in the past. He knows what he did was wrong, but it doesn't matter anymore. Tavia says she kind of meant she wanted to know how they met each other, not really some weird story, but Vince was like, "Oh, I thought we were just talking about the beginning of the apocalypse or something like that." He says he found Shell about 10 months later on the road. She was in an RV with Becca. And then Shell says, "All right, I might as well say what happened with me and how I ended up meeting with Vince in the first place." Day 154 pops up. Shell says she was within a community at a truck stop. And Stephanie, Becca, and Ariana, as well as Shell, are sitting in a table in the diner as some older man plays a song on his guitar. Shell is painting her crossbow with some cool-looking skulls. Some of the residents of their community are the cancer survivors from Season 1, including an older man named Clive. The group is led by a man named Roman. He sits in his own booth of the diner and doesn't really move or talk to anyone. Suddenly, one of the guards comes into the diner and brings a problem to the attention of the group. The guards have carried in a man who was seen trying to steal from one of their guys on a supply run. The man begs for mercy as his hands are tied up, and Roman goes up to him and asks where his people are. The man is crying and says he's by himself. Roman says he doesn't believe that bullshit. Roman puts a gun to the man's head. Shell and Stephanie come over. Stephanie tells Roman to calm down and that no one needs to get shot today. Roman is noticeably pissed off. He says what the fuck else will they do with him? They have no prison to keep him in, and they sure as hell can't just let him go. Shell says there has to be another way. The man says he's not a bad guy, he can just go and he won't ever come back. Roman says it's not going to happen. Shell tries to talk to the man and learn some information from him, but Roman tells her to back off with that sweet talking shit. Stephanie yells at Roman for always getting so goddamn angry at everything. Roman grabs him by the collar and tosses the man across the parking lot. He starts yelling and says this is how their community falls. Their community falls when they let some piece of shit like this live within their community, and then they end up coming across another group that's with the same people, and then they're all dead next thing you know. Roman says he's the leader, therefore he makes the decisions. Roman puts the gun to the man's head as Stephanie runs up to him and tries to get him not to pull the trigger. Clive ends up coming over, and so does some of the other residents of the community. Roman backs off and goes back to his RV trailer. They keep the man held up in the diner tied to a support beam. Shell and Stephanie talk to the man. The man says he's alone. He wasn't lying. Shell says they believe him, but just to be sure, he's going to have to stay here for a bit. They feed him and everything, and they say he'll be fine. Shell and Stephanie go outside and talk. Stephanie says that Roman is unhinged. Shell agrees. She says she'll talk to him. Shell goes into Roman's RV, and then Roman tells Shell a story about how in the beginning of the apocalypse, he gave a man a second chance. This man tried to shoot his wife, but after it was deemed to be a misunderstanding for her being a dead one, he let him join the group. And the man ended up raping and killing her a week later. Roman said he's done giving people second chances. Shell goes back into her RV for the night and puts her crossbow down on the counter. Later that night, Shell goes back to check on the man, and he's gone. She confronts Roman in the RV and finds him gutted open in front of Roman holding a knife. Roman has gutted open the man in his RV. Shell is shocked as she backs away. Roman drops the knife as Stephanie walks in as well, and she is shocked. Roman snaps and grabs the knife again and attacks them. Shell fights back as Stephanie is stuck in the tussle as well. Stephanie ends up falling on top of Roman, who is holding the knife up, and Roman slices her stomach open. Shell rages and knocks Roman into the wall. He hits his head hard as Shell rushes out at Roman with the knife, and they barge through the RV door and out into the parking lot. Shell is holding the knife down to Roman as the residents come running and see what happened. Shell gets off Roman as the guards aim their guns at her. Roman yells out saying that Shell killed the man and then killed Stephanie. He says she's on a rampage. Shell drops the knife and says no, and she tries to stick up for herself, but the guards don't want to hear it. The guards have this just weird, they're very devoted to Roman, so they're likely to believe him in most of this. They start to tie her up as Becca comes running, questioning what the hell is going on. Clive says he doesn't believe it. She wouldn't do this. Shell says it was Roman. Ariana finds the knife used in the situation. It was the same knife that Shell had. It was one of the knives that had one of the skulls painted on it. It was Shell's knife. Shell says he must have stole that off her or something, but they don't believe her. Back to present. Shell says she broke her ass out after they had her prisoner. She went with Becca and eventually found Vince on the road. Russell questions if this Roman guy will ever be a problem again in the future, and Shell says they're far from that place, so hopefully he's long gone or dead even. Wyatt decides he'll tell his story next. Day 240 pops up on the screen. Wyatt and Eddie drive down the road in their truck. It's pouring rain outside. They jam out to some rock music. They talk about their high school lives and their love interests that they had and stuff like that. But suddenly Wyatt sees something walking the road, so he swerves out the way, but a lightning strike ends up hitting a tree nearby and knocks it in the path, so causing them to topple their car over the side of the road, and they end up between a boulder and the ground. Their car is stuck between that. It's upside down. They're next to kind of like a little pond as well, and the rain starts pouring down hard. Wyatt tries to unlatch himself from the seatbelt, and Eddie is completely knocked out. The rainwater starts to build up quickly and forms a pretty big pond. The water rises as Wyatt sees a walker coming from the outside towards the car. Wyatt grabs a piece of glass and stabs the walker in the head when it peeks its head through the window. Wyatt cuts his hand pretty bad from the glass. He's able to cut the seatbelt with the glass, though, and the water continues rising and almost drowns Eddie. Wyatt slaps Eddie softly on the face and tries to wake him up. Eddie opens his eyes. A couple of walkers come to the car and start reaching towards them. Wyatt tries to free Eddie. He gets him out successfully, smashes the windshield with his foot so they can both get out into the road, and they fight off some walkers with tree branches. Suddenly, they are approached by a woman holding a fully automatic M16. She lights up the walkers behind them, and this woman is Bonnie. Bonnie says that was actually quite interesting day for her as well, and then Bonnie goes on to say what happened with her in the same exact night, actually. So they met in the same days, these two stories that are going on. So Bonnie is working in a barn at a farmhouse with Dee and Leland. It is nighttime and raining. Leland seems to be flirting with Bonnie, but Leland is married to Dee. Bonnie forgets about it as they run back to the house through the rain. Dee is cooking up beef stew as Bonnie goes into the room and checks out her stash of drugs, including heroin and meth. She was a drug addict. She tempts away from it and goes back into the dining room. The power suddenly goes out as Leland says there should be backup generators in the generator room outside, and you have to go a decent distance to get to it, though. Bonnie says she'll do it, and Leland insists on doing himself, but Bonnie says they're the nice ones, allowing her to stay with them here, so this is the least she can do. Bonnie gets to the generator room as she notices people in the cornfields of this farm looking around with flashlights. Bonnie hides behind the generator room building as she was about to turn back on the power, but she stops, so they won't notice. If she turns on the power, they might notice someone's there, so she doesn't do it. Leland and Dee notice the flashlights coming from the cornfields. They head outside as Leland brings a rifle. Bonnie sneaks into the cornfields quietly as she is spotted and then chased. Leland and Dee approach the cornfields as Leland calls out for them to show themselves. Bonnie hides behind a tractor and is attacked by a woman. This woman is Ariana from Roman's group from the Shell's story. Bonnie fights back as they scuffle across the ground. Leland fires a shot in the air as he yells out again. Bonnie hears someone yell, "Fall back." Dee goes through the cornfields looking for Bonnie. Leland also follows a bit further behind. Bonnie is able to knock out Ariana with a crowbar. Bonnie then sees someone else coming, so she gets behind the tractor and waits till they get extra close, and then she takes the crowbar and smacks this person in the skull. But this person happens to be Dee. She knocked her so hard that her eye is slightly popping out of her skull. Dee dies right in front of her. Leland then comes and sees what happened. Bonnie lies and says that Ariana, this girl on the floor, did it. She takes Ariana's M16 that was strapped on her. And then we get back to present. Bonnie says she couldn't take the guilt and knew that she'd end up telling Leland what happened that night, so she just left. The others just left, though. They never ended up attacking them or stealing anything from them. They just came there and then noticed people were there and then left. Omid asks if those people were the same as Romans, and Shell says she believes so since her description of this girl was the same as Ariana. but the farmhouse was far south from here, so they're still safe regardless. Vince asks, what about the love story afterwards with Wyatt? He says that's probably the best part of your story. Tavia looks at Wyatt as Bonnie gets all nervous, and then Wyatt gets quite red. Bonnie says she's alright, and she's got to go check on Eddie anyways. Vince finishes the story with saying they met up each other 400 days into the apocalypse, actually. That was the day that they remember seeing each other. And Russell says he thought he was the only one who kept track of the days, and Vince says he actually used to do it, but not anymore. After about 500, after they've been living at this home, they just decided to stop. Tavia asks, what about you guys? And she looks at Kenny and Aaron. Aaron says, I mean, that's a lot, and he doesn't really want to get into it, and Kenny agrees. Tavia then says, nah, just how you guys met and shit. Just as Bonnie ends up coming into the room all nervous, and she says, Eddie. She says Eddie's been bitten. Eddie is shown to have a bite mark on his stomach. So then we get to see a little flashback of what happened actually with Eddie back at the greenhouse in the beginning of the episode. When Eddie was crawling away from the walkers, one of them actually came from the side and got on top of him and bit him as he stabbed in the head afterwards. And bit him on the stomach, like we said. Then they came to save him in the van, obviously. He didn't tell anyone about it. But he was bitten, and Bonnie just found him bitten. So, boom, that's the end of the episode. Quite a longer one compared to most episodes. Had a lot of story. It was mainly an episode to just develop these 400 Days characters because we need to understand who they are. We need to understand what they're about and their personality, and that's why I decided to do this episode. I previously actually didn't have this episode in place, but I decided, you know what? I want the people to get to understand who they are better, and that's the whole purpose of this episode. So next episode is a pretty cool one because it's going to focus on everyone. We're not going to hold back next episode. It's not going to be a bottle episode with a specific group. It's going to be everyone. We're going to see Clementine's group. We're going to see the 400 Days crew with Kenny and Omid, and it's going to be everyone. So it's going to be exciting stuff, and it's going to kind of possibly start to connect these two storylines a little bit. We'll get little bits of hints of connections between them. We already got some hints here and there, but we'll get more next episode. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. See you guys in the next one. Peace out.